I believe that data is really useful when it flows, when it connects different parts of the business and allows us to understand what's happening inside and outside of the walls of the organization. The Data Project is a journey to bridge the gap between data users and data practitioners, and to help organizations understand the value of their fourth intangible asset and manage it well so that they can keep looking after their most important relationships at scale, no matter what. My name is Loris Marini and I'm your host. Welcome to the Data Project. So today is all going to be about data governance. Data governance is one of those words that can sound a bit intimidating, rigid, sometimes expensive. The term kind of gained a bit of a bad reputation in the industry, and sometimes we hear experts say, don't say the G word when you're talking to the business. So today I want to deep dive into this topic to understand what is the perception around the term and explore its role as part of the larger data management program, and understand what are really the cognitive and emotional challenges and biases that we should expect when we direct the data governance program in a large organization. And my guest today, you can see here, is the legendary George Firican. George is the Director of Data Governance and Business Intelligence at the University of British Columbia. He's a passionate advocate for the importance of data and the creator of lightsondata.com. George aims to provide fellow data management and data governance professionals with practical content in the form of templates, guides, best practices, articles, videos, courses, and mentorship to address key questions and challenges in the role. And he started creating content, I think, in 2018, 2019, and it was really out of the necessity of structuring the conversation and creating order in chaos. And I think it's fair to say that George is one of the most brilliant, humble, and friendly data professionals in my network. So I'm really excited to have you on my show. George, welcome to the Data Project.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here and to have this conversation with you. And I'm humbled by your introduction. Thank you so much.
I don't know even when to start. I think we have so many topics to discuss, but perhaps let's take an easy start, because it's morning here and it's late in the evening there. How did you start Lights on Data? How did you end up in directing the data governance program at the University of British Columbia?
Oh, so two different questions. So Lights on Data started long after I started my career within data governance. And it's just for a way for me to give back. Originally was actually, Lights on Data was geared towards nonprofits, governmental institutions, healthcare, but as in nonprofit healthcare, not some of the, let's say, American healthcare institutions, and education. So it's really trying to service those industries that don't really benefit from a lot of funding that can go into this type of education tools and that other private industries would be able to benefit from. So that was kind of the niche. But as I was putting content out there, and like you said, it was kind of try to make some sense out of the chaos. As I was putting content out there, I started to get good feedback, and I noticed, listen, the content I'm putting out there is not just for these industries, it's overarching. Everybody's benefiting from it. And a lot more people are confused about it than I originally thought. So in a way, that was a good thing. I'm not by myself in this bucket, and it's good that whatever I'm providing there, it's helping people out. So it's just a way for me to give back to the community.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think I want to thank you personally for that, because it's helping me a lot. I think you especially, I don't even know which resource is more valuable, to be honest, between the website and the YouTube channel. The channel has so many videos, and really some of them are really short and sweet. Some go really deep. Just yesterday, I refreshed my memory by watching your webinar on data governance maturity models, yeah, which is really good and so much, and the research, and you put everything in context. But I think I'm jumping a couple of guns here, so let's take it easy and start with the why. Let's start with the why, right? Like, why the heck should we worry about data governance in the first place?
Oh man, I think we could just spend the entire time just talking about this topic. So
go for it.
Feel free to interrupt me whenever. Well, first, I think, we need to understand the why and the what. What is data governance, right? And why do we need it so much, like you said? And if any of you are listening out there that are interested in data governance or have been interested in data governance, you know that as soon as you Google what is data governance, you end up with, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of search results, most of them even containing a definition to data governance. And guess what? They're not too alike. They're also different, which is, in a way, in my opinion, quite ironic. Because data governance, that's one of the things that's trying to achieve all this consensus as well, and when it comes to definitions.
And we
as data professionals, as business professionals, I think we can agree that there's no one definition that's alike with the other. So even to me, to be honest, sometimes it's confusing when I'm talking to somebody else. We're talking about data governance. We first need to understand, well, are we on the same page here? Because when you're being approached by certain vendors, let's say, they say, oh, well, we have a data governance product. But then when you go more into it, you find out, well, it's just a data catalog, or it's some sort of a data security or a data classification, or so maybe parts of it. So there's a big confusion. Yes. And I'm still kind of trying to figure out in my head, how do I explain that better? But I'll try and do that here on your show. But before we kind of pick one of those definitions that we can see out there, I think let's understand what it is. So without necessarily defining it, let's understand what it is.
Yeah.
I think first we can agree that data can provide a lot of value. And because of that, it's an asset, right? And it was Clive Humby that, kind of coined that saying, data is the new oil. Mm-hmm. And I know there are certain data professionals that, scream, no, it's not. And Scott Taylor, if you're listening to this, I know you're one of those. And I agree. I mean, it's kind of a bad, maybe, comparison, because there are so many cases where you would say, well, no, it's clearly not like oil. But really what he was trying to say is that data brings value. That's, and he chose this analogy, maybe not a good one, but that's the whole message beneath the data is the new oil. Okay, so data is an asset; it brings value. That's the key point there. Now, what other assets does a company have? Well, there are plenty, but there are two that kind of come up to my mind right away. The first one is the employees, and the other one is, well, kind of any financial asset. So for these two assets, the financial and the human resources one, we kind of have two disciplines that manage the assets, right? Human resources that help manage the employee life cycle. So recruiting, hiring, onboarding, retaining, creating those workplace policies and so on. And then you have the finance department who's kind of handling those financial assets. So payroll, accounting, record keeping, conducting financial controls, audits, all that stuff. Yep. So like we said, data is another asset. So we need a discipline to help the organization have the necessary strategy, policies, processes, roles, responsibilities that we need to ensure that data is managed as an asset.
Absolutely.
Are we on the same page so far?
I think so, 100%. And I feel the pain of the marketing, the marketing buzz. It really doesn't help. So one of the reasons why I started the data project is to try my best to go beneath the surface and kind of say, okay, what do we actually mean by that? Let's focus on the what. So this is brilliant. And I feel I could detect that you wanted to say something else about that.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to just conclude this piece and, take like finance, for example, who is managing these financial assets. Who is doing that? Well, we kind of have the, the accountants, right? The accountants are also governed by a set of principles and policies. They're also checked by auditors, external parties, and so forth to make sure that the books are all right. Nobody's cooking the books and so forth and so on. So, the principles, the policies, and auditing kind of accomplishes for financial assets what data governance accomplishes for data.
Yeah, that's really well Well said. And there's a couple of things that come to mind when you say structure, right?
Yes.
And the first one is sort of the policies and the procedures and sort of the let's call it the pipelines. It's a term that makes sense in my mind because I'm doing a lot of Notion pipelining stuff, or the data pipelines. But it's what I mean is the process. You know, it's what do we do when something happens, and
Right.
who's responsible for it, and what should we focus on? You know, what's the priority? Where should we invest more? How do we track the progress? What is progress in the first place? And the other one is the sort of the infrastructure, the architecture around it. So you in the case of finance and HR, we know that there's a difference between the type of software you use to track your employees, to track performance reviews, and the overall like business strategy around the management of those resources. And so with data, it's kind of the same. There is a difference between the tooling and the infrastructure that allows you to manage data and make sure it's trusted, and the people focus, behavioral focus bit that must be there. Otherwise, you can have all the tech you want, but you're not going to be able to guarantee that level of availability and trust. Would you agree with this difference, or do you see them as a one thing? The reason I'm asking is because I'm confused too between the role, specifically in the role of data governance in data management. How does data governance fit in the broader data management picture?
So for example, the DAMA organization, they're kind of seeing data governance as part of data management. And they're seeing, so they kind of have this diagram, which looks like bundt cake. The bundt cake is like this round shaped cake with like a hole in the middle. Each slice of this bundt cake represents like a data management knowledge area. That's what they call it. And some of these could be data quality management. That's one area. Data warehousing, it's another one. Data security, data architecture, so forth and so on. I think there are about 10 or so different data management areas. And in the middle, you have data governance. And data governance kind of makes sure that all of these data management pieces are working with each other, because there's always overlap. So if we just take a look at data quality, well, you need to have some data quality if you're going to ensure data security. You also need to look at the data architecture if you're going to architect your environment in such a way that would be able to support good data quality practices. Right? All of these also tie together with the whole business intelligence, which is another pie of this slice of this pie. And so data governance is in the middle. It's like a data management area, but has sort of its fingers into everything. Because again, they're putting that structure together. They're figuring out the roles and responsibilities, what the standards are, what the procedures are. And then off of this, let's say, framework, all these different areas are maybe taking those templates and working it for their own expertise. It's kind of like, again, back to the HR finance example. HR, again, they're the ones that are creating those policies. Well, these are the grounds to fire somebody type of a thing. They're not necessarily going to do the firing or the hiring. They can help with that. They're providing the templates. They're providing the help with it. But then you have the individual manager that is still managing their own employees, their own staff, by using these guidelines and the templates and tools and standards provided by the HR group. So kind of same with the data governance team.
Yeah. So, in a way, data governance is like the foundational element of data management, and data management is the foundational element of anything that you want to do with data. Like, so if you want to walk it backwards, if you want to do machine learning, advanced analytics, BI, you got to have data available that you can trust at scale and safe. To that, you need to have an overarching data management program in place. But data management is useless if you don't govern it well, if you don't worry about that people side, the behavioral around it. Would that be a fair, yeah?
Exactly. And some people say, like David Mark was kind of saying that these two are two different sides of the same coin and you can't have one without the other. And sometimes whenever you have data management without data governance, and some do, they actually might have some data governance elements within each one of those data management programs or projects, but it's not really structured or recognized as its own program. So, and like data quality can have good data quality without data governance either.
So I want to take the perspective now of the skeptical business leader, the one that goes like, oh yeah, we already spent a ton of money on IT. We have systems all over the place. We do have data, right? That's not a problem for us. Now you're saying that we need to implement this governance thing. It sounds really complicated and expensive. I wonder what the ROI is. Is it going to even pay back in a year, in 5 years? We have other pressing priorities. And so when the board needs to decide how to allocate funding, inevitably, if you don't have a strong business case that people, and maybe you do, because, we both get it, but there are people that don't necessarily see it that way. So I think it's interesting to explore what happens through the life cycle of a piece of data. Like, from the second that you get access to a spreadsheet or a CSV file or like some blob of binary information on a disk or in the cloud, right? That's called that T0, the first instant in time you have access as a single person to that. Then why is the behavior important? Well, what happens to this file over, the next 6 months or a year or 5 years across thousands of employees?
Well, if there's no governance in place, first of all, it's kind of like the Wild West. And this is what we're seeing in a lot of organizations. You as the employee, you have to do your job. So you get access to this Excel file and you kind of have to take matters in your own hands and you got to work with it. A lot of data scientists are doing this because they have no other alternatives. But it's also one of the reasons why they are spending like 80% of their time cleansing it. For starters, right? So this employee would do that too. So first they would try and understand what they're looking at and how they could tailor it to their needs. And they would do so, they would do some data cleansing, they would do some data transformations, maybe they would do some definitions in their head at least to try and bring that data into the context that they're working with. And they're doing all this work to prep that data for whatever the project they need it for. Now, multiply that, to another 100 employees that might require the same data file or a similar one, and they replicate the job in a similar fashion, but not the same, because their own context, their own understanding would be different. So they're looking at it with, different eyes, and because there's no standards, there's no definition, there's no clear pathway that they could approach and know who to go to ask or what, intranet page they could go and check this against. They would make their own assumptions. They would replicate the same work that their coworker did on transforming that data, cleanse that data, and then bring it into a different context. Even though it's the same piece of data, they might have a different definition for it. So in their own project, let's say they're putting together some sort of analysis or they're creating a report, even though they're working off the same numbers, they could reach different conclusions and different, sums, totals, whatever. So this is like one issue, of course, but it's also that inefficiency that multiple people are really doing the same thing about the same data source.
Yeah, and good luck tracking the lineage, where does a piece of like a number, where does it come from?
That's another issue. Yeah, the lineage and the security, privacy concerns of it as well. Absolutely. So and especially with GDPR, and that's why kind of data governance, I think, came into more of a focus when GDPR came into effect, because GDPR was requiring for this to happen. Okay, what's that lineage? If we have that right to be forgotten from the customer point of view, can you actually detect all of the pieces of data sources where you have this customer's data that you can remove?
Yeah, and the other side of the coin is the carrot, right? This is, we're talking about the stick. I was reading the other day this brilliant article written in 2009 or 2010 by James Price and a co-author here in Australia. They did some qualitative research. They went around. I'll probably do an episode on this because this deserves it. They went around and asked a whole bunch of organizations, C-level, what are the impediments to proper management of information and data in your organization. And they talked to CFOs, the CEOs, the CTOs. And what emerged is that the fact that data is intangible, that you can see it. And that's why kind of all these analogies break down, right? The oil analogy, the water analogy, all these things are made of matter, the atoms that we can touch. We have an intuition for how they behave. With data, not really. Right, because it's typically a tech thing. You know, there's a database. You need to know engineering or basics of IT to be able to manipulate it and access it. So the normal person in an organization, someone that is just on the front line doing the work, dealing with customers, they deal with spreadsheets. And the way that I understand it, okay, there's a table here. I'm in control of this. What's the matter, right? What can possibly go wrong? And it's that relationship that you were talking about, the lineage, the dependencies, the what's going to happen tomorrow, the interpretation around the number, because numbers are just numbers, right? But the real world is made of people. What does a number really mean? Is that important? And so I think here we could talk about metadata management, but before we go there, I want to still go back to the why in the C-suite. Imagine you are a CEO and you are pretty aware that this is the situation. You want to do something about it. What's the first step into a data governance program?
Well, I think it's to first determine the driver. So why do you want to invest in data governance? And for different companies, it's different reasons. And there are kind of maybe 3 different paths as to what the driver is, at least from my experience. The first one is the stick, really. It's ensuring that regulatory compliance. And for a lot of them, this is a great incentive because like Citibank, they were fined with $400 million, I think it was last October, November, where they actually cited a lack of data governance as one of the reasons why they got the fine, which is like, that's a great business case for a lot of companies that just, hey, reference that example, that fine, and maybe you would have some power to convince your CEOs to invest into it. So that's kind of the stick. If we don't implement this, if we don't invest money into this, we will pay a bigger fine than if we would have invested into it. Okay, that works for some. The other one maybe is really more of some sort of there's a business imperative. So they do want to do better, right? They want to meet their business goals. They want to serve their customers better. They want to provide better, services, better products. I don't know. They want to grow in a particular market. So it's a specific tied to a business goal. I think this is like one of the best ones. And these ones then translate into a bunch of other data areas. So it means that, hey, we need a better data science program, or we need to invest in this AI to automate certain things. So we would reduce the manual work and get better results that way. Or we just want better reporting to at least see where we stand, like from an operational point of view. Because we're relying too much on hunches, not on data. We don't have the reports to tell us where do we stand right now. This is actually true with even big companies. So that's sort of the business imperative. And the last one kind of ties it all together, but it's not really a reason. It's maybe the intermediary between all these, but the fact that they don't have good data quality. So because they don't have good data quality, they can't meet those regulatory requirements very well, and they can't meet those business imperatives. So for a lot of the data management professional, this is kind of the first hurdle that they want to approach. Okay, we need to improve the quality of our data so that based on good data, we could build everything else.
Yeah, and there's another aspect that comes to mind here when you talk about efficiency, and I think it's still in the same paper, which I'll link in the description. I think Tom Ridman was talking about this figure as well. It's estimated that the average enterprise loses 20% of the yearly salary, basically, for the average employee because of poor practices in the management of information. And we're not talking about, complicated pipelines. We're not talking about data ops or, Snowflake data warehousing. We're talking about simple rules around how do we handle Excel files, when do we attach it to an email, whether we create a copy or not. And 20% is a lot of money. And so that made me wonder, first of all, there's a lot of low-hanging fruits here that we can tackle. So data governance can be very simple. It doesn't have to be this boiling the ocean thing, as you mentioned in your videos. And the second is, this kind of gives us a scale of how big is the impact of a properly funded data governance and data management program. And so in marketing, we get if you ask the average marketeer, they would tell you, yeah, it's expected that you spend 5% of your revenue for marketing. We get that, but in data management and data governance, somehow we don't. And so I wonder, would that help? And once we secure the funding, what is that first step? Do we put together a committee, or do we first run those interviews, as you explained in one of your videos, trying to take a slice vertically across the organization and talk to anyone, understanding what is the current, real practice in the field, and not, going through the shadow IT and actually getting to the ground truth. How are people behaving around that data? What do you think? How did you do it?
So let me add to that example first, just with another example. I cover a lot of this in my business glossary course, into how you can put a business case together on investing in a business glossary. And a business glossary is really this tool that the data governance program would deliver, one of those artifacts that it would deliver. And it's really kind of think of it of a dictionary for the company that would have their business terms defined and explained to make sure that there's no assumptions, no ambiguities. If we're talking about this is what we mean by customer, well, this is what we mean by customer. This is how it should be calculated in reports, and there's no confusion about it. And there is a lot of confusion about a bunch of business terms. But anyways, to cut a story short, the IDC, which is the International Data Consortium, I think it stands for, they did a survey a while ago, and one of their findings was they found out for middle to large companies in North America, average information worker spends about 8.5 hours each week kind of chasing information and not finding it.
That's crazy.
And they define the information worker as like anybody in a managerial position that needs to access like reports. Plus, of course, not just your business intelligence development team and all that stuff, but anybody that needs to rely on reports, on documents to do their job. They're searching for it. They don't know where to find it, and they're just wasting time just looking for it. Exactly. Looking because they don't have that process. Though they need to talk to their colleague because a lot of that information lies in their heads, and it's a lot about networking and personal relationships. And not that that's a bad thing. We need more of that, but we should also have it centrally available to people to consume information.
I mean, it kills innovation too, because the speed of thoughts, I mean, there's an estimation that in the brain, the round trip time for a signal, for a spark from a neuron to, so the time that it takes to propagate and back, it's 100 milliseconds. So a tenth of a second. That's kind of how fast we think. But if it takes you a week to get a bloody Excel file, then that thought is long gone. Frustration is sky high. The whole hormone imbalance is flipped in your system, and so you go from I have ideas, we could do stuff, to I hate this place, I want to get out of it. And I've seen it happen a number of times. So it should be very intuitive. This is an easy case, I suppose, for someone. Do you want to have more time per day? It boils down to exactly how much energy do you want to have left when you go back home to your kids? Do you want to be flat because you dealt the whole day with impossible like mazes that you feel like nothing is progressing, or do you want to have everything one click away?
Exactly. Yeah. That frustration is definitely tangible in a lot of companies. And even the time that you spend on it, that's costing you, that's costing that company, it's time that's paid, that's wasted.
There's an aspect to that I think I agree 100% on, and is the seeing data governance as a change management project, like a challenge, I suppose.
Yep.
Gotta be careful not to say project and say program, but a change management challenge, and is and the importance of focusing on short-term wins as well, to sort of demonstrate to the business that there is actual progress and there's tangible outcomes, even if they're small, but there are, it's progressing. And one of the things that you touch on in your videos is the problem of under communicating that vision. So let's focus now on this aspect here, the people to people interaction. When you've got the funding, you convince the C-level, there's enough funding to run for at least a year, but you want to focus on getting a deliverable within the first 3 months, and now you got to start building the picture of what is reality of information management in the org. How does that work, and what are the human challenges involved there?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that, because the human challenges are maybe the biggest challenges with data governance, and maybe not just with data governance, but in general, right? I feel that we're not doing this enough. We're not practicing that change management aspect enough. And with this, I've made this mistake, so that's why I think I can talk about it, and I think a lot of others did as well. As soon as we get that funding, we kind of want to just run with it and work and do stuff and improve data and, set all this stuff. And we forget about the people side, which is the most important piece. We forget to engage with them. We just tell them after the fact, oh, this is what we've done for you. And they're like, that's not what I want. Why would I want that? How is that helping me? From the start, most of them would just be reticent and standoffish, and because they were not involved in the process. So my first recommendation is, first, you kind of need to have that, education / listen to complaints / find out what's troubling them. So then you can build a case for each one of them, for each department or each individual that you're talking to. How would data governance help them with some of the challenges that they've expressed? And that way, they're also part of the journey along the way, right? So you always have to communicate what you're doing, what you've done, what you're planning to do, and how all of these things tie into what's in it for me type of a thing. Yeah. And this can be nerve-wracking at times. And of course, you got to deal with different personalities. There's different priorities. There's different communication styles. So, it can be a bit of an energy drain at times, but I think it's very important to do. I was at this conference years ago in Florida. One of the panel speakers there, one of the sessions, he was saying that data governance, in his opinion, is 90% communication. Maybe 90% is a bit high, but still, I agree that communication is a very big part of it, and I feel it's not done enough.
This is the part that really excites me, because I feel like there is a huge opportunity to have a real impact at scale in an organization if we understand how to communicate and how frequently as well we should communicate. And so my experience is not directly in data governance, but this episode that I'm going to tell you now in a moment was in the context of a data engineering team where we were building a new system, more scalable, more powerful. The company used to have a legacy system. They just outgrew it, but they developed 3 years of analytics and BI on it. So there was a lot of reverse engineering. There was a black box really. So you have to start from the plot and understand what data models needed to be ready to reproduce it in a new front end system. And I was kind of at the beginning just alone, demonstrating, can we even do it? And then the project started to pick up momentum. 3 people from the engineering team joined, and we were full on the deadline. The focus was sprinting, writing as much code as possible, getting it done so we could switch the old system, turn on the new one, and save, some money in the process. But what happened with that really output focused approach is that we completely ignored the communication with the business. We knew what was going on, but the business didn't know. And we assumed that they knew, right? Because they gave us the funding, it was a thumbs up. And I'm mostly responsible for that. What I didn't understand is that they put down the funding, but that doesn't mean that they understood the impact and the value. They were exploring. They were like, look, let's see if this is actually the right way of investing this chunk of money right now. And this is something that you're right. Like we need to do a lot more, to the point that I'm wondering if it makes sense to have someone within the team whose primary goal is to communicate. Because when you're down into the woods, when you're writing the code, you're like worrying about the data type for that column. You're worrying about the test for that table. It's very tiny little detailed thing. You're not in the headspace to talk strategy or to necessarily write a newsletter and let everyone know why you're doing it, because it's the what is the number one priority. Have you seen an example of that in place? Do you think that could help?
Yeah. So, a lot of times, let's say the lead of that data science team, they're kind of looking to have this ability and desire to communicate, and they have the skills to do so. But oftentimes, like you said, we like to keep our heads down. We want to do the work, and we want not to have as much engagement from that point of view. We just want to get stuff done, right? Yeah. So what I've seen that works very well was 2 things. One is either to couple some of these keen workers with like a business analyst type of an individual who is very well at articulating the business needs and translate those into technical requirements, but also the other way around. They're able to engage with the business stakeholders to raise different technical constraints or to make sure that communication exists between the two. So not necessarily like a communication specialist, but the business analyst would have those skills to do so. Or you actually just embed that as part of the process that, kind of programmatically, you have to do this before you start working type of a thing, or every 2 days you have the sprints or whatever project management methodology you're adopting, then that can kind of force you to do it and remind you to do it, take you out of your comfort zone. Yes.
Make time deliberately.
Yes. But, you have that structure, you have the framework that well, this is how it works here. And the other one is actually when you do put, let's say for the data science example, when you put the data scientists within the business units, and there's different models for this, like they're either like part of that business unit and they report to the head of that business unit, or it's some sort of like a consultancy model where you have a central data science unit that is then lending, let's say it's data scientists to the business, and they become embedded into the business unit so they can learn the context, understand the problems. But when you do that, you're kind of pairing them with the business stakeholders and their task for poking you for communication, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think I remember you saying, and it made me laugh because I think it's important, but it's also subtle, that there are 3 communication steps for a successful data governance program. And one is, as we already mentioned, to focus on the business outcome, and so align the program to the strategy and the vision of the business. Then talking to departments, so that's kind of completes the slice top to bottom, and then communicate the results, maybe if you have them. apart from the difference between, active listeners and passive listeners, and being mindful of the two, it can be a bit intimidating for the data governance lead to communicate results 3 months into the job, right? Because you feel like you don't have results. What results are you talking about? This is long-term stuff. Do you feel that is indeed a problem? And perhaps what is a tip that you could share for a data governance lead to focus on something that is still valuable, and it is in a way a deliverable, even though it's not the finished product?
I think there's all kinds of metrics that you can track your progress against, and some are, like you said, like low-hanging fruits. And I think in 3 months you can do a lot of work, even just putting a metric out there on how many meetings you've had already to engage business stakeholders. I think that's already a great indicator that, okay, something is happening. Like, people are getting engaged, people are listened to. That's something that is worth reporting on. I think during those 3 months, you also start some sort of a data governance committee, council, advisory group, whatever people call it. And again, that's to me a big accomplishment, and that really sets the stage for who's this group that will set the strategic priorities and will determine, put the stamp on, yes, this is the standard that we will adopt, and all that kind of stuff. And even reporting on that, who your members are as part of the council. How many times have you met? I feel there's so many low-hanging fruits that you can report on already. Even just identifying, hey, we've actually just taken a map of all the systems that we think we have that, capture data or work with data.
That's amazing.
All of that, it's, I think, easy to do. And I mean, at least in the first 3 months. Yeah. And it's something that nobody really has. If you're asking one person, well, what are all these systems? Everybody would give you different answers depending on their view of their work. Yeah,
there's so many. The conversation could take very different routes now. I'm trying to keep it focused on the human challenge, but perhaps.
I think the human challenge, there's a few human challenges, but one is the different personalities. Working with certain people, it's definitely hard. So I think you need to learn how to navigate. There's a lot of political challenges.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a consideration on what people should you start bringing into the same room for certain conversations. It really serves the basis on how you select certain members for your data governance council, even how you select some of these focus groups or working groups. So that's why it's great if your data governance lead comes from within the company, not as an external source, because they kind of know all these ins and outs.
And in this way, the lead and the sponsor are still different people, right?
Yes. So the lead, I would call that like your data governance manager or director, or whatever title you want to give them. And to be honest, in a lot of organizations, data governance is kind of like a one-man show in terms of the title, and this is like a one-person department many times. Wow. If you're lucky, you might get an analyst, you might get a business analyst, maybe a project coordinator. But yeah, usually it's a one-person team. And yes, you do work with IT, you do work with business analysts, but they don't report to you. So it's always also a challenge on competing for their time and their resources and all that stuff. So it is a struggle. But yeah, if you're lucky, you get, you have a couple of people in your team, and you also have great partnerships with you, like a data modeler from the IT team for like data architecture team, or the business analyst from the project management team, and so forth and so on.
I wonder if that thing that you just mentioned, the fact that people perceive the data governance lead as a tax on their time, essentially, is because the vision hasn't been communicated properly at the level of the CEO. So in the next question is, what is the role of the sponsor? Who is a data governance sponsor?
Well, ideally, it's somebody that's at a very high up, that has a lot of influence, that people respect and they listen to. And it's a person that, when you get a communication from them, when they're stepping in front of that meeting room, you'll want to listen to her or him. And when they say, we got to invest stuff in data governance, you're like, oh yeah, we have to, just because they said it type of a thing. They don't even need to give you an example. So that's your like best case scenario type of a leader that you want exactly to sponsor your program, because people listen to, they follow their direction, and they're also ideally able to secure resources for you. That's what you want the sponsor to do. You want him to be able to say, hey, dear sponsor, I need another head on my team. They'll say, yeah, I'll get that done. I'll figure it out. I'll get that done for you. So they can help secure that. They can also help convince other leads like directors or VPs that, hey, you gotta, your team needs to have an active role in this. We need these type of resources. We need your time. We need your involvement. So the sponsor is able to bring people on board. And usually, sometimes, the sponsor doesn't just need to be one person, but multiple people. And sometimes that's even better, because if the sponsor leaves, and it's the case that does happen at the C level, they can rotate every couple of years. And every time they rotate, you kind of have to make your business case again, or you got to convince them if it's something that they haven't dealt with before. You got to go through the motions, and it happened to me too, and it's a pain.
Can imagine.
If you have more than one, you kind of, one fell, but you now have somebody else as a backup, and they could kind of they can make that business case for you. And it's also the power of example, which we love, I think, as humans. We see that, oh, somebody else bought this. Maybe I'll buy it as well. Or somebody else is vouching for this, then I'll trust it more.
Yeah, it's a very good point. That also requires for the two sponsors to kind of align on what the priorities are, but in a way kind of diversifies risks, because you know that there are different perspectives already aligned at the very top before you even start spending a single hour interviewing people, creating a maturity model.
And yes, like you said, there are definitely pros and cons. You definitely don't want two sponsors that butt heads.
Yeah. I find this topic very, very interesting, because if you think about an organization from the outside without any involvement, emotional or political, like added noise to the train of thought, and you're like, okay, what's the purpose of an organization? Is to deliver value. They typically want to do it at scale. They have a bunch of customers, a bunch of brands. They really have one mission, but there are different departments, and that is natural, because it's a way for us to manage resources and tackle complexity. We divide things into boxes, and we say, okay, you do marketing, I do sales, I do engineering. But it's far too easy to forget that we're all doing the same thing. And so this competition for funding and for promotion and for headcount within the organization, I wonder how much of that is helpful when you think about a program like data management or data governance that impacts everyone in the organization. There is no one person left out. The data, and that's why I keep banging that introduction, data is valuable because it connects all business functions.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily think about that. The real world is made of objects, and we are good at making sense of objects, but we don't think in terms of relationships that much. Yeah. Apart from our network of, really close friends, our family, the people that interact with us. So even on social media, there are people that have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, but there's only 1,000, right? Research shows it's only a very limited number of people that we can manage, and in the sense that we know in what relationship we are with these people. And Correct. In a business, in a data set, we have millions of data points across many, many systems, across regions. So it's normal. It's to be expected that people lose track of the web, of how interconnected the systems are, and they focus on their thing. What do I have to deliver tomorrow? Okay, the report. Great. So I've got a data problem. Give me good data. I want, one person in my team just focusing on the data quality because I want to look good on the eyes of the CEO. Mm-hmm. Do you think this is something that it's a problem, or it's a problem, but it's only at the theoretical level because you'll never be able to really change the structure of an organization so that everybody is really on the same page. And so we have to find, as data governance professionals, ways to get around it.
Yeah, I think it is a problem, and I think I'm theorizing here, but I think data, for the most part, it's still seen as a byproduct and not the product itself for a lot of companies. Like, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Amazon, they do see data as a product as well. But for a lot of these other companies, they see it as a byproduct. No, what we do is we sell some sort of a physical product. Yes, we collect data that we sold it, but that's the byproduct of our sale. And because they are seeing it as such, they're not investing as much resources into managing that byproduct as they do in, selling their physical product, if that makes sense. So because it's seen as this sort of afterthought, something that gets created, but it's not the intention necessarily, it's not what we're after, then it's harder to convince why resources should be dedicated towards this and not marketing, not sales. Make sense?
Absolutely. No, yeah, I was drifting. I was thinking about a similar problem when you talk about change management, and is climate change and all of the I guess risks associated with rising temperatures globally. Mm-hmm. It's something that for a long time suffered of this very same perception problem, where people were like, this is not impacting me today, tomorrow, maybe in 10, 20 years. Who knows if the scientists are correct for 50 years. By, in 50 years time, I might not even be around. So that's not my problem. I'm not going to prioritize it. Then, and this goes on for 20 years. Then Swiss Re, the insurance giant, comes and does a really good piece of research, and they put a dollar value to the rising temperatures of the ocean. And they estimate, 20 to 30 trillion dollars lost in the economy by 2050. And immediately you get, the US, Europe, Canada, everybody like, yeah, we gotta double down on our efforts. We gotta reduce CO2. We gotta become carbon neutral. Okay. So you understand this is something a bit humbling for us, especially for me. And for all people that like to think in abstract terms, and they like the philosophy, they like the sciences. All this thinking at a high level is nice, but we need to remind ourselves that what really the majority of human beings understand is money, right? How much is it going to impact the bottom line? And so in this sense, the work of folks like Doug Laney with Infonomics is really trying to approach the problem in that direction. Like, let's establish a framework for for understanding the monetary value of your intangible asset, the fourth intangible asset.
Right.
And let's really be serious. I mean, this is not just, science talk. This is not just nice to have. This is a must have. I feel like starting, even when people understand, because that's the other side of the coin, right? That when you have the strong business case and people are like, oh my God, we can't live without this. We need to do it. And when it's going to be a priority for the business, then you have the problem that expectations are sky high. And did you feel that in your current position, or was it something more of an organic kind of growth in terms of understanding the importance and also becoming familiar with what could actually deliver?
I think it was a mix, and it was a mix of people as well, seeing it differently too. For a lot of them they weren't necessarily looking at their data, but what they could do with it. So for example, the fact that they had to send all these marketing materials to prospect customers, and they would waste or spend a lot of money only to find out that a bunch of those materials would return back because it was like an invalid address, or because they weren't following like postal office standards. So the mail house would charge them more for this bulk delivery, or the fact that, hey, they only got like 1% worth of sales of spending so much money. So then they understood, okay, well, what can we do to reduce some of these costs? And what can we do to best target those that we think have a higher chance of becoming our customers. So that was like, one of those needs. And that already starts with from a very positive place, because, they're on board of understanding, okay, well, that means we need to invest in data management and data governance, right? And so starting there with the business approaching you or recognizing the issue, I think it's already a win, and you're starting from a really good place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to it's funny because you give all these great examples, and it makes me, think of others as well. So I just wanted to add this one piece on what he mentioned on the value of data and infonomics, and the example with the rise of the sea level and the what that's costing. And we have this company in Canada. They sell basically like hiking gear and outdoor stuff, and like I'm an outdoor guy, so I like frequenting this store. And in Australia, you have something similar like Anaconda or Kathmandu, right?
Yes,
yes. Like, okay, so think of this store as kind of like one of those. And they recently sold, because of COVID, they had issues with their revenue and everything. They sold to this American company. Well, ends up the American company, the reason why they bought it is for the data. is because they had this loyalty program, so they were gathering a lot of different information about their customer trends and what they're more interested in and when they're more likely to buy and all these things. And this company, which is part of a bigger consortium that has different types of stores, such as this one, they're basically buying information on how you can better succeed in the world of retail. Mm-hmm. They didn't care about the products, they didn't care about the stores and the tangible assets, but really the information that they could mine out of this data, which obviously the company didn't really do a good job at taking advantage of it. So I really found that to be very interesting. And, such a great opportunity. And again, an example for all these companies that are collecting data that are maybe not utilizing it as they should. And other organizations kind of seeing the gap and capitalizing.
I'm excited though in the space because I see the rise of a number of courses that focus on data literacy, not so much for people directly working, the practitioners, because there's a ton of courses on Python, Excel, and warehouse design, but I haven't seen a lot of data literacy programs for senior leaders, for people that sit in the C level. And it's incredible how even those that actually are active on the topic of data governance and data management and information management, those are the first that they have serious troubles with basic technologies, even just like a Google Doc, for example, or the idea of an online version of an Excel sheet that you don't have to keep bouncing, by email. You can just collaborate and comment and keep it as a single. Yeah. So there are so many low hanging fruits here, and I can see something is happening in that data literacy for C-suite space. I'm excited to see more because I think this is the spot that you want to really tackle first. Because if you got that support and people feel that it's okay, right? It's okay. If you're 60, if you're 65 years old, 10 years ago, the technology was completely different. 20 years ago, Google didn't even exist. I mean, Gmail, right? So it's okay to be sometimes out of sync with the trends. The first step is to recognize that. The second is to feel okay with that. And the third is to have someone or some organization that can guide you through a very simple process to go from this level of maturity to what's expected to be a data-driven organization without necessarily charging millions of dollars, because this is it's basic education. But I'm excited about the impact that something like this can have. So we'll see.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I was kind of thinking about this, that I should focus on my courses towards like upper management as well. Offer short introductory lessons on that. So yeah, because I definitely feel there's a high need there for that audience.
Tell me about,
I feel like the data world now is kind of like where IT was maybe back in the early 90s. And maybe in some parts they're still like that, but just from the point of view that they always had to make the business case, hey, you got to give us money so we could help you better. And they always had to make a case for themselves. And why do we need to invest in security? And why do we need these equipment? And why do we need this software? And let's move on from, recording stuff on paper and move it into Excel and all that stuff. So I feel like we're kind of following the same pattern and same challenges that IT did, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, with the added advantage that 30 years ago, we didn't have social media so developed and people shared a hell of a lot less. Today, it's enough to go around and look what remote first companies have been doing, especially the tech companies, because they're the ones that use the latest cool tools available. But it's enough to just look at what they're doing. The first one that comes to mind is GitLab. GitHub is another one. There's WordPress. Examples of large organizations that operate across many different time zones. So they have thousands of people and they're fully remote. They literally leverage every single thing that modern digital technologies have to offer, and somehow manage to keep growing and keep people happy, fulfilled. So I'm not saying it's easy, but there are many, many examples we can take
I agree.
Inspiration from.
But you know what else sucks that I've noticed? When COVID started in the first 6 months and some of the companies were closing or they were having issues, some of the first positions to let go were in data management, data governance.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the topic now is dinner table topic, like Pedro Cardoso said in the Master Data Marathon 2, where he was giving a roadmap for the MDM promised land and what in unpacking data trust, and obviously data governance is a huge part of that. But I wanted to dive into your courses and promote it to everyone that's listening, because I think the stuff you're doing is incredibly valuable. So what are the top 2 or 3 learning outcomes that you have in mind when you designed the courses, and what's going to come next?
Well, first is to try and simplify it as much as possible. Make sure it's clear, not so much theory, but actual practical stuff that you can take and apply. So that's why I'm providing those templates and actual examples that you could follow. I feel that it's much easier to learn when you're looking at a real case.
Yeah.
Yes, I had to take names out and things like that. Yes, I respect the privacy of my work and previous clients and stuff. But really practical takeaways that you can learn from. And as you know, my expertise lies in data governance, so a lot of my courses are on that topic. But then I also have one that I've co-developed with my colleague on data visualization for data storytelling. So that's also an area that I'm very excited about. And
so lightsondata.com is the place to access this content. Absolutely. Cool. Well, we have some time left, but at the same time, I feel like we covered so much. So I'm gonna leave the ball at you. Did you want to add anything?
I think more people should watch your show because you're doing such an amazing job, and I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing more content coming from you. And you have a lot of great things to say. So Thanks, looking forward to having you on my show.
Yes, that's gonna happen soon as well. I have my T-shirt ready. It's
that's awesome.
nice and ready for me. Well, George, big thank you for taking this time. I know that is late. It's the end of the week and it's the end of the day for you. So double thank you. And
thank you.
I think I'll see you soon on the other side.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
If you found these topics useful, you can support the show in 2 ways. With the public feedback, if you're on Apple, search for the Data Project in the default podcast app. You can add a rating and share your thoughts at the bottom of the page. The second best option is to create a free account on Podchaser and leave a rating there. And obviously, I am always looking to improve. And as they say, we are blind to our own selves. So if you have 2 minutes to spare, let me know how do you feel the show has been going so far. There's a link to a Google form in the show notes. I'll see you in the next episode of the Data Project. Until then, take care and stay safe.